There are a bunch of different ways that you can use the Mitutoyo M-Plan objectives in your photography. Probably the most popular, and certainly the one I like the best, is to use it with a Raynox DCR 150 as a relay lens. For those of you who have just recently come into possession of a Mitutoyo and aren't quite sure what to do with it, this video is for you. And it's a long one. We're going to go over the whole setup and use of the Raynox DCR 150 as a relay lens with a Mitutoyo M-Plan 5x infinity corrected microscope objective. To take pictures with an infinity corrected microscope objective like the Mitutoyo M-Plan, you need a relay lens. Without a relay lens, you have no way to focus the light on your sensor. One of the most popular relay lenses, because it's both one of the best and one of the cheapest, is the Raynox DCR 150, which is actually a diopter. It's a close-up lens, but it makes a fantastic relay lens. Today, I'm going to show you how to use it. So in addition to showing you the whole setup for the Mitutoyo and the Raynox, I thought we should kill two birds with one stone. I'm all about killing as many birds as possible with as few stones as possible. So what I'm going to do today is, in addition to going over that, I'm also going to answer a couple of questions that people have never asked me, but they would if they thought about them. The first is, how can I take 6 to 9 photographs every day in the studio, every day, no matter what I'm working on, and keep that pace up? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you an effective, efficient workflow for actually how I take photographs. It's not going to be for everybody. It's for people who are taking photographs and doing other stuff at the same time. It's all about efficiency. We're going to go over that. And then there are a few people I've talked to who've said, you know, I really want to do that stuff you do on the TV, that enlarging photography stuff, but I don't have any room to do it in. Well, I'm going to show you around my studio today as well. So we're killing 3 birds with one stone, possibly more. We might smash some eggs while we're in there as well. You never know. Shall we begin? Before we start, some cheery news on the light glass optics front. I hear Jeff's doing much better. He found some additional objectives, not many, just a few. And yeah, we have him on medicine now, and he's willing to sell them at the same price. So if you're one of the holdouts, you probably really ought to get a move on, because they won't be there for long. So your Mitutoyo M-Plan 5x infinity corrected objective. It's not corrected 5 times. I said that too fast. It is an infinity corrected objective, and Jeff does have a few of them left, and you really ought to get one. It's the best lens for 5x magnification photography in the world, except for the key optic. But I'm taking that on somebody else's word. They won't let me touch the key optic. You have to give them a $100 bill to touch it. I made that up. It's very expensive though. Very expensive. It's also, believe it or not, like twice the size of this objective. And this objective's 5 times the size. Well, it's not. It's not 5 times. I'm trying not to exaggerate in the stuff I say. But anyway, it's no exaggeration to say there's only a few of these left. So get on it. Thank you to all of my Patreon supporters and the people that make a contribution through the website. And just everybody who helps in one way or another. It's greatly appreciated, but it is particularly appreciated from Harold Hall, from Trisha Young, and from Mike Canfer. These 3 fine people really set the bar quite high. Thank you so much for all of your extraordinary help over the last few months and years. Thank you. And talking about goals, was I talking about goals? I don't think I was, but we're talking about goals now. We're creeping closer to the Macro Cage Revisited Part 2 2021 Cage Project. I made all of that up as far as the name goes. but you get the idea. It's not too far from getting kicked off. I'm finishing off some final things well, it's more than just the final things. I'm doing a lot of work to get it ready to go. And one of the things that I'm going to do is change my lighting. I told you a few weeks ago that I ordered some TT350s, the small compact Godox flashes, and they were sold out on back order everywhere. So I got them and then had to not get them after that. So somebody sent me, in fact, about half of you sent me a notice that came out about Godox's new MF12. An unfortunate name for anything really, but it is nonetheless the MF12. These are SB200 Nikon flashes in a Godox box, only with rechargeable batteries instead of the 123s or the ones that the Nikon has. They're only $100 a piece. They're tiny, but apparently they flash a lot of times, which is good. They run off the X Pro trigger or the regular Godox X1 triggers, and I need them. So I ordered 6 of them because it's been my dream to be able to have 6 independently controllable light sources around my subject. I always want that, but they don't fit, as you're going to see in a minute. So what's the problem? Why am I even mentioning this? Well, I ordered them, but I don't have any money. I need you to pay for them. If you... That was a bit abrupt. I ordered them, but the bank's going to call me if you don't help me. And I thought, well, you're going to want to know how to use them, so I should show you how to use them, which means you'd probably be willing to help me out. You can go to the website, alanwallsphotography.com, and there's a thing there called donations. And if you go there and drop a little bit of money in the hat so that I can buy these flashes, well, I'll buy the flashes. You don't get anything. No, it's not even tax deductible. Yeah, you have to pay taxes on the money before you give any of it to me. So from your perspective, it's a really bad deal. From mine, it's excellent. It's an excellent deal. And I think on balance, it turns out to be a better deal than a worse deal. So thank you very much if you think about it. I'll keep you posted and let you know when I reach my goal. We're nowhere near it right now. If you thought we covered a ridiculous amount of minutia in our last video, which was the one on retouching, you've seen nothing yet. Because I am going to show you my entire workflow, we're going to begin where I begin. I break my schedule up into half days. There are 3 half days in a day, so they're not exactly half days. There's a morning half day, an afternoon half day, and a nighttime half day. Here's the deal. I am never not busy. I am either recording or writing or researching or answering emails or doing the website. I'm doing something all the time. Yet my photography is priority, because if I can't stay current and stay in practice and do good photography, you're not going to be interested in listening to what I have to say about photography. So I take pictures every day. I average about 6, sometimes as many as 9, seldom more than that. Remember, for me, each picture is anywhere from 100 to several hundred photographs. And if I was to just take a picture when I felt like it, I wouldn't get any work done, for one thing, and I wouldn't get many pictures taken either, to be honest. So what I do is I have a plan, and the plan begins with me deciding what I'm going to photograph. Now, if you're squeamish about insects that are no longer living, don't look, because I'm getting ready to show insects that are no longer alive. The first thing I do is decide what is my priority. If, for example, let's just say hypothetically that I was writing a book and I'm on the chapter of small insects. So I know that I'm going to be working in a certain size range. What I don't want to do during a block time of photography is have to change my lens, change my camera, change my lights, even change my backgrounds. I want things to be as efficient as possible, so I set things up based on what I'm going to shoot, and I decide that the day before. Yes, believe it or not, a whole day in advance. Usually what I'll do is I'll pick 6 to 9, it depends how big they are, how complicated they are, how dirty they are, how long I've had them, what kind of, am I just going to shoot one view or multiple views? And all of that goes into figuring out the number. But I separate those from the rest, and I get them, make sure they're washed and in alcohol the night before, and they are then ready for me to shoot the next day. If possible, of course, I like to shoot fresh, but that's seldom possible with my schedule. So I have, for the purposes of this demonstration, I've picked out 3 or 4 insects that we're going to use. But because I'm using a 5 times objective and I'm going to be using it at 5 times, I'm also going to be using a crop frame camera. There are severe limitations to how big my insects can be. And one of the biggest time wasters that new folks to doing this will have is picking out, like a 1.5 foot long praying mantis and taking it into the studio and getting it all set up and clean and combing its hair and everything, and then taking a peek through the camera and not seeing anything but green, which is a little bit of the exoskeleton. You need to think in terms of your sensor size and the bug size. Sorry about that. I had to run and get my Mitutoyo measuring device. I only use the best. What I do, and I'm gonna stop saying that because it's all what I do. I'm showing you what I do. That should be the title, what I do. So you may have a better way of doing it, and you may have a 3mm bug that you have trained to trot out every time you're looking at a bug and just stand there and show you what 3mm looks like. That would be very cool. Anyway, I set it up to about 3mm, right? I'm using a 24mm sensor. I have a 5 times objective. I want a little bit of room. I want to be able to compose my shot. I'll set it up about 3.5mm, and I've got this little measure now, and when I'm picking stuff out, I'll just give it a quick measure just to be sure. Only takes a second, but saves a lot of anxiety later. So buy one of these. In fact, I'll sell you this one. I'll give you 10% off what I paid for it. So normally my activities start in the toilet. Let's go and get set up. So this is the studio in all its glory. That's the vacuum cleaner, which is on the toilet, which is a bit embarrassing. That's my equipment storage area. That's where the mirror used to be. That is the backdrop and shower curtain. It doesn't protect from water, though it's not waterproof. So what else? That's it. That's the entire place. This is my temporary macro cage and experimental test bed. It's also a, what do you call it? Entertainment center. It's finally getting put to some entertainment use after having had it for donkey's years. What I've done is I've put a piece of wood on a swivelly thing on the sink because it was an available space. My power management is next to the water supply, which is probably not the most ideal arrangement. So for the time being, this is what I'm shooting on. It is a piece of wood that has the Stackshot Cognosys Stackshot macro rail bolted to it. And the whole thing is just sitting on top of this very sturdy piece of furniture. That's the word. Now, why am I in here? somebody is bound to ask. Well, this is the only room in the house that I discovered has few vibrations. It doesn't have none, but it has only a few. So this is where I work. My image quality increased dramatically after coming in here. It's a bit cramped and I'm a bit claustrophobic, so well, you just have to get used to it. My backdrop is a big sheet of velvet, and I hang colored backdrops if I want something else. We have here a camera, a bellows, all of it sitting on a rail. We have a specimen platform. It's really just a lab lifter shrouded in black felt, and an XYZ R table on the top there. You'll notice that on this board, I have really as many flashes as I want to. They're all connected the same way. That is, they're clamped using a super clamp from Small Rig, and they're on a Small Rig articulating arm. These are the 9.5-inch ones, and they are fantastic. These are the new arms that have the rubber grommet instead of the pad. These things hold just brilliantly. Haven't had any trouble with them at all. I have one for this flash. I have one for a flash on the other side. This is something I built from an old microphone stand. It's just a piece of galvanized pipe. And I've got 3 more super clamps up here. And the new bendy arms, I think this is the 2070, which is the best clamp I've ever used. And this is the smaller version with just the one section. This is the best GoPro holder I've ever used. Absolutely superb. Bendy arms attached to super clamps as well. And basically, I'll step back so you can see, all of my studio is concentrated on that tabletop. There are many different ways that you can mount this objective to your camera with any number of different relay lenses. We're using the Raynox because it is inexpensive and incredibly sharp, easy to use. Now, I'm going to give you 2 ways that you can choose from depending on the adapters that you have. The first way is to use it mounted in the forward orientation. This is the Raynox, like so. Now, it has on one end a 43mm ring, and what we're going to do is mount this to our bellows in the forward orientation. I like to use a 43 to 42 adapter because I just happen to have a 42mm reversing ring. It's not a reversing ring, it's just a mounting ring. It's got a female thread, 42 on one end, and then an F mount on the other. So that's perfect. That's it, ready to mount on the bellows. We'll talk about the distance you have this from the camera when we get in there. Now, on the front of this, you can put almost anything you have that allows you to get a distance of from between 5 and about 30mm of separation between the Raynox and your objective. So the first thing we have to do is connect something to a 49mm filter thread. I happen to have a reversing ring in 49mm, which is ideal. It screws right into the reversing ring and leaves me a male F-mount bayonet, which just happens to fit into the female F-mount bayonet of the BR3. I'm being casual about this because it doesn't matter. So long as you have some separation between the front of your Raynox and the back of your objective, I like 30mm. Some people mount it right on the glass. That is terrible for me. It causes a lot of reflections and softens the image. Now, how you get from 52 to 26 is up to you. I use a series of step-down rings that go from 52 to 47 to 37 to 30 to 26. I'll put all this in the show notes. If you have one set of step up, step down rings, 20 bucks for the entire step up and step down series, this is what you end up with. So this is ready to go once we have the objective on it. And it's the same thread, size 26. So this is the way I would recommend if you've got all the adapters. This works every time. Now, I'm going to show you one reverse mount setup. To reverse the Raynox, this is the piece. The filter ring needs to attach to the bellows. Well, we already dealt with that because we had a piece somewhere in here that was exactly that size. It's this piece. So if we take this reversing ring, this is the 49mm reversing ring, this is what it's actually made for. We can screw the Raynox directly onto it, and that mounts just like this directly onto the bellows. So now all we have to do is get separation from this 43mm thread out to a 26mm female thread for the objective. Let's just slap that little 43 to 42 back on. That's this one right here, 42 to 43. We'll put that on the. Be careful with this Raynox with the adapters off. The rear glass element is really floating in the breeze. So I'm going to put the 43 down to 42. Then I'm going to mount the 42 reversing ring. It's not a reversing ring because a reversing ring would have a male thread on there. It's just an adapter. There we go. Now this will fit directly onto our BR3, and we basically just flip the Raynox around. There you go. That's it. Now the Raynox is backwards, and when we get in there, I'm going to be taking some measurements. If we're using the Raynox backwards like this, you need to take your measurements from the end of the scallops. So from this line back to the sensor, that's your image distance. And that's what you want to set at the distance I'm going to give you when we get in there. So if we're using it not reversed or forward, then the line that we use for our reference is very similar. It's just this groove right there. This groove. That distance to your sensor needs to be what I tell you it is when we go in there. Okay, so that's this setup. All that needs to happen now is this goes on the bellows, but we need a subject first. This is going to be a very abbreviated teaser almost on how you prepare your insect. I'll start out by getting a container of fresh water. My insects will already be picked out. To give you some idea of what size insect is going to work with this objective, that actually what I do is I put all 5 or 6 of my insects in the water bath. I'll put an ice cube in there as well. There is something funky going on with my weevil. I don't like the look of it. It's got something coming out of its weevil butt. Onto a square of tracing paper, I will position the limbs and antennas and wings using puffs of air. I'll dry the insect while looking at it under the microscope. I get it about halfway dry. Then the tip of a moist but not wet brush, I need to get it up off the paper. And that is when I will pin it, put 1 drop on a postage stamp sized piece of tracing paper. Do this part only 1 at a time. Get just the tiniest amount of glue. Position the pin on that little shelf. I'll look at this again. There's one other thing we need to do. We need to create a base for the pin. Now, I'm just going to use, once the insect is well on the pointy end, I'll bend the pin depending on how I want to pose the insect. I take blue tack, which I stretch out into these worms while I'm holding the insect steady so it doesn't go anywhere. I'll start at one end of the blue tack and I will start making concentric circles around the pin. When I get about that far around. That's enough of a base to hold the thing where I want it. If I say wanted the pin to face towards the camera, I'll take one pass with the blue tack underneath the far end of the spiral, then the next one flat, and then the next one underneath. And you can see what that would do. It tips the base towards me. And when I put it down on the surface, I'll be able to squeeze it a little bit and position the bug exactly where I want it. I try to do the easiest first, and then I do the hardest second. He looks good. He looks good under the microscope. So let's head to the back. It's cramped, but I'm hoping that these cameras are set up to give you a fairly decent view of what's going on. I have one of these IKEA Janslow lamps, which I always keep handy. When I'm in the dark in here, this is perfect for illuminating my subject. I don't know how many flashes I'm going to use until I get the thing set up, but I always have 3 or 4 in here, and everything's attached to articulating arms and small rig clamps, ready to go at all times. Now, what I do is I go through this whole thing systematically, starting with the camera. I use, for every day's shooting or every half day's shooting, I'm going to format the card. I use 120 gigabyte Extreme Plus SanDisk card. Seems to do great. I've never run out of images. So I make sure that the card is in and formatted. I use a dummy battery and a battery charger that is made by, I can't remember the name. I'll put it in the show notes. This looks like an EL15A battery, and it just fits into my camera. It works on all the Nikons that I have flawlessly, and it provides me with not a continuous juice for my camera, so I can shoot all day long with this. Just have to keep an eye for overheating and things like this, but it always has power. So what else on the camera? I put it in mirror up. This is to reduce camera shake. Make sure that your stack shot, by the way, if you're shooting at 5x and above and you're doing it with any regularity at all, you need a stack shot or a Wii macro or an XYKJJ, whatever it is. You need to have an automated rail. This just becomes impossible to do. Put the camera in mirror up, which means you need to set your stack shot to take 2 shots in the configuration menu. I set my stack shot up to give me a T settle time of 8 seconds and a T off time of 8 seconds. That is so that I have 16 seconds between shots, which I have figured out is just enough time for all of my flashes to recharge without overheating. It just works for me. Other settings, there aren't any really. I'm going to use the camera in live mode to set up my shots, but turn it off for the stacks. The camera is mounted on a bellows, and the bellows is mounted on the stack shot. Now, something I see constantly is where the camera and bellows are positioned on your Cognisys stack shot. Imagine my stack shot is all the way at the back and everything all the way out at the end of the bellows support. What this does is creates torque on your ball screws down here at the bottom, and whether you actually see it or not, it interferes with the smooth operation of the screw, and it can result in inaccuracies in step length. It's a very easy thing to do to make sure that your stack shot rail is kind of close to the center or a little bit forward, and that your camera and your bellows have their center of gravity right over the center post. This keeps the distribution of weight good on the stack shot and allows it to function accurately. I found this to be the biggest problem when I'm using the precision mode for very, very short stepping. Then if I have a lot of displaced weight out in front or behind the stack shot, I see less than accurate steps. All right, we're going to talk about positioning the bellows now. Come to think of it, where is the lens? Here it is. So first things first, I'm going to put the lens on. By the way, when you have your setup, I keep mine assembled. It's quicker that way. And I have a box for each setup. But I keep a lens cap on it, or a body cap. And usually the Mitutoyo comes off and that goes in its own case. But we're almost ready to put this on. There's one thing that I haven't done, and that is to put the condom on it. Now, how you make this and the size and the position and how you place it is entirely up to you. But I do not like the shiny outsides of these objectives. You'll notice that the shiny surfaces in this room are covered like I was a vampire, because I don't want light bouncing off anything. So yeah, this is an offender. And let me go get the proper shroud. Okay, so here's the one I like to use. It's just a piece of foam that I've cut to size to fit over the end of the objective. It's reinforced with another strip of foam, and I have a little cutout on the top to hide the shiny part of the objective. And this thing slides right down over the objective all the way to the end. I'm not going to put it on because I want you to see everything that I'm doing, but that would be on to shoot. So I'm going to put the Raynox. Now I'm using mine reversed. Always put a body cap on your bellows too. Protect the inside of the bellows. Mount that just the way you would a lens. And now the distances. If you're shooting with this in the forward orientation so that the scalloped part is facing is closer to the specimen, what I recommend you do is have a distance of 208 millimeters from the mark on your camera that indicates the sensor plane to the junction of the 42 to 43 adapter and the Raynox, that thin line I showed you. That should be 208, or there we go, that's right. That should be at the 208 mark. But we don't have this forwards, we have this reversed. When I'm doing it reversed, I use a distance of 200 millimeters, 200, from the sensor to the end of the scallop, which is right there. Not the near end, the far end, where the scalloping runs out. That corresponds nicely to the surface of the front element of the lens, and it's what's worked for me. So I make sure that's right at 200. Now, I normally would do it from where you are, Mr. Camera, but you're in the way. So I'm going to do it from here. And what I'll do is I'll lock the back, and I'll lock the carriage that holds the whole bellows so nothing else is moving. And then I will position this at 200 millimeters from the sensor. What I do is I get as flat as I can, and with one eye I line up the 20 with the end of that line of scallops, and double check that I'm on the 0, and I am. And Bob's your uncle. Now, I just moved it. I was trying to lock it and I just moved it. That's because I'm doing this backwards. I'm sorry, I'm going to come right next to you. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. Yeah, this is what I'm used to. So I'm lining it up on the 20, just like so. Once it's lined up, don't touch anything, lock it. There we go. That's us now set up, okay? That's the distances you need. You don't take into account the infinity space, that's just a fixed space. Now, remember, if you're used to shooting microscope objectives and this is your first Mitutoyo, this is a long working distance objective. So you have 30 millimeters before you need to have a specimen there. So I'll measure it just to make sure that I have an idea. It's going to be around the middle there. Perfect. That's what I want. Okay, so we brought in one specimen, and it's this little tiny lynx spider. which is really cute because he's got really big eyes, very, very attractive. So what I'll do is I'll position the spider about where I think I want him. And you can do this from standing behind the camera and aiming just by eye down the center axis. This is usually when I'll bring a light in. And by squeezing and pushing on the blue tack, I can change the angle. I can tip him sideways one way or the other and get him exactly where I want him. After a while, you'll get used to where he needs to be in order to be at the center of the objective. When you think you're about right, then you can turn on your camera, turn on your live view. I'm going to move one of these cameras so that you can see what I'm doing. While I'm here, we'll run over the camera settings real quick. 1/250th of a second, that's my sync speed, and an ISO of 100. And of course, there's no F number because there's no lens attached. And that's all you need to know, except that it is in a mirror up mode. So this is the view from the camera going down the bellows. We're all set up at the right distance. I honestly do not know what I would do in my macro photography if I didn't have these small rig clamps. I would be absolutely lost because I have them, well, you can see up where the other camera is, I think. There's 3, 4, 5 of them, 6, 7. Here we are. This is the view from the camera, in the camera, of the camera, like so. Perfect. So what I'm going to do now is make sure that my subject is bang center. Oh, there he is. So we were good on the midline. So I'll get my subject nicely in focus, nicely positioned on the table to do the rest of the setup so that I can see that I'm set up where I want to be. Those eyes are super impressive. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is get our lights ready. Now, if you are shooting with these objectives and you're using continuous light, I wish you good luck. I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time doing it, but I just can't do it. I'll tell you what, I left my water in the other room. I'm going to go through to the other room, and while I'm in there, I'm going to tell those of you that come with me the truth about vibration and microscope objectives. In macro photography, there are a couple of things that we do that cause problems with image quality. Probably the most common in folks who are just getting started is diffraction, and not understanding diffraction and not realizing how high your effective aperture can get as you add magnification. That's the number one thing. That probably isn't the number one thing in the group of people that watches this channel. I think that in this group, the number one offender is going to be pretty much all the time vibration. But the question that I got this week really highlighted the misunderstanding that I think we need to clarify. I mistakenly and wrongly call the artifact that we see, the soft images, in high magnification focus stacking, I call it motion artifact or motion blur, because in a way it is. But the question that I got was, well, I look at my pictures, they're not as sharp as I want them to be. I know that it's not diffraction because I've calculated the F number and I'm safe, I'm under 20 or whatever. I know it's not artifact from this, that, or the other, all the other reasons that you rule out, and you're left with motion artifact. And his point was, I'm using speed lights that have a flash duration of 1/20,000th of a second. How can I possibly have motion blur in these images? It seems impossible. And of course it is impossible if you were taking single images, but you're not, you're focus stacking. And when I talk about vibration, what I'm saying is that between shots, your subject is moving, which means if you have a regularly oscillating paintbrush, if you have a subject that is doing this on some regular interval sympathetically with your air conditioner or your fridge or whatever, and you're focus stacking, sometimes the insect will be here. Sometimes it will be here. Most of the time it will be towards the center. The distribution of these movements would look like a bell-shaped curve. And most of the movement would be within a range in the middle, which is why you can get away with this. Because if enough of the positions are central, then what you end up with is a relatively sharp picture. But if you have oscillations that are larger, or if you're shooting at higher magnification, then you can have these positions all over the place. And when you stack them together, you're going to have subtle changes in the outline as it moves with respect to the axis of the camera. And you end up stacking together a lot of tiny differences in the shape of the subject. And you end up with, blur. And that's what I mean by motion blur or vibration blur in this kind of macro photography. It's a different kind of motion blur. It's actually the kind of blur you would see in a time lapse, because that's really what it is we're shooting. Does that make sense? So being mindful of it is half the battle. Okay, let's get back in there. Okay, the next subject we need to deal with is light. Now, I do not recommend using continuous light for magnifications of 5 and above. As bad as vibrations are when you're only getting snapshots of the vibration, when you use continuous light, you're also getting actual vibration, which causes more blurring. I just simply don't recommend it. Okay, the first thing you need to do is make sure that your flash units and your trigger have fresh charged batteries. I only use the battery packs that come with the Godox flashes, or Eneloop Pro, the black. I go to each of my flashes, and I do this even if I'm not planning on using the third or fourth flash. I put fresh batteries in it because I've got a day's shooting and I want to keep track of where the battery charges are. So I drop the battery packs into those that need it, and then I approximately position the flash where I think I'm going to have it. Now, this is just an initial first step. That's going to change. The second one is takes 4 cells. Now, you'll notice that these are weird little diffusers. They're just pieces of tracing paper that I cut in a star shape and then Gorilla Tape over the front of the flash. This is a softer, gentler diffusion than anything you can buy, and it allows more of a ball of light than it does a cone of light that the ones that have reflectors on the inside do. For the studio, this is all I ever use. It's basically like holding a sheet of tracing paper in front of the flash, and all of my flashes have one of these on. I just keep pieces of tracing paper and tape on them so that if that's not enough flash, I can add a layer. I want you to see this clamp. This is my favorite clamp ever. This is the Small Rig 2070, I'm pretty sure is the number, and it holds things in an absolute vice grip. I love it. There's one that has just a single section on it, but the one I like is the one with the 2 sections on it, because using this clamp, I have 4 articulation points so that I can get the most accurate positioning, and it will hold absolutely stock still. So if I light this spider from above like so, I can position the light exactly where I want it, and it's not going to wander from that position. I think I may just have blocked my GoPro. Let me move this a little back for now. I actually keep 2 triggers in here, an X1 and an X Pro, and I alternate them so they always have fresh batteries. just as important as the flashes. So I change my batteries for every session, and usually, because I'm just shooting 5 or 6 images, all the batteries should last for all of the images. So the trigger is on. What I like to use is the trigger controlling one flash, and it's usually my key light. I let everything else run as an optical slave from that. I seem to get more consistent, good timing by doing that. So I'm going to turn on the flash. With the new X Pro, you don't need to worry about proximity. There is a proximity setting that you do have to worry about with the X1. This functions even close in like this without any dropped flashes. Now, there's a gadget I've never shown you guys before. I use it on every shot for focus stacking in the studio. It's this. It's similar to the tunnel that I used to make, but much easier to use. It is a single sheet of tracing paper that has the edges turned over on themselves and taped down over a piece of 27 gauge soft metal wire. And it allows me to change the shape of this diffusion tunnel to whatever I want it to be. And it has a tag of tape and a bendy arm, and all I do is dangle it like so and position it over the objective and the subject and the XY table, and get it down as close as I can, get it turned as straight as possible. And this is my secret sauce. This is the best way to get beautifully diffused, well lit, globally lit, soft macro shots, is by shooting through this kind of tube, if you will. I love it. If you have your trigger set up and you just come in and start shooting, oftentimes the light that you're running from the trigger will not change its setting to what you have here unless you set it to that setting. I just select it and then press it OK, good to go, and that will then register with the flash. I turn on all the flashes to make sure that everything is running the way it's supposed to. It doesn't bother me that I have to manually change the power on these other flashes. It doesn't bother me because I'm standing right here, and that gives me maximal control. So I start out usually with one light and then add lights, but I'm not going to do that for this demonstration because you know how I do that. I would start with a key light and then add lights, but I've been shooting with this setup all day long. So I know it works. I'm going to take a test shot. Now I'm in live view. We've been lucky with the batteries so far. So this is what I'm looking at in the camera. And is everything set up? Yes. There we go. I look at the histogram. The histogram, it's a bit hot actually in the red. Too much so. I'd want to back that off. See the specular highlights here and here? That will ruin this photograph. And that is being caused by this flash is too close and this flash is too close. You didn't see me pointing at those, but I'm going to adjust them real quick. Just take my word for it. I don't know if you can see from there, but 2 of these flashes are too close and they need to be moved back. This just is a matter of doing it and doing it and doing it. You'll learn to recognize which light is causing the problems and how. I've said this to many of you individually, but I'll say it to you as a group. I would rather have twice as many flashes at half the power than I would have half as many at twice the power. So if I have a choice between having 8 flashes at 128th or 4 flashes at 1/64th, I'm going to always choose the more flashes because the light is much nicer. It's easier to control. That is infinitely better. Let me show you the test shot. The image itself looks great. The specularity is largely gone. The histogram looks fantastic. I'm perfectly happy with that. All right, so I'm shooting at 5x. First thing I need to do is check my mode, auto distance. The distance of my steps. When I'm shooting 5x and just regular subjects, I'll shoot at about 20 microns. You can probably get away with longer. I find 20 just about right. 15's too many photographs. I never want to start again. Even if I am starting again, I check my start and end position. So I go to change settings and hit the up or down button. Then I use the screen to select my start position. So I pull back until the furthermost thing that I'm interested in drops out of focus, and then hit up or down to set it. Then it asks for the end position, so I use the forward button to go through my subject. All I want is the face, so that's far enough. Then hit the down button, and now it's asking me to press up or down to start. Now, my routine before I leave the room is to turn out the IKEA light, turn off live view, double check that everything else is turned on, turn out the room light, then I'll press start. While that's going on, I'm getting the next specimen ready. This same setup would apply if you were using extension tubes instead of a bellows. I find bellows easier to work with because it's so much more adjustable, and going from 200 millimeters to 208 millimeters is not that big a deal. So yeah, I much prefer the bellows for this kind of work. Whether you use the Raynox in the forward orientation or the reverse is still out. I have gone back and forth on this more than any other question in extreme macro. And it's because I get what I think are really good results both ways. If you are just unsure about your calculations for step length, and you don't want to just follow any rule of thumb that I may give you, don't be afraid to shoot a test stack. Take 10 photographs, take them back to your computer, look at them together or try to stack them. You can stack a short stack like that in Photoshop in a few minutes. And make sure that you have continuous focus. Make sure you don't have lines of focus. You need to be more precise at this level than you do when you're shooting with a macro lens. Even though the depth of field is shallow with a macro lens at the minimum focus distance, it's a darn sight bigger than it is now. You're literally going to have just a razor thin in focus area. So if it takes shooting a quick stack to make sure that you're not missing anything, do that. When you do a bad picture in macro photography like this, you've wasted an hour or more of your life by the time you've done everything. Maybe more by the time you've edited it and stacked it. So do it right and double check. Lots of test shots. Do everything on the conservative side, and you'll be glad you did. Your pictures will be better. This is hard stuff. You don't realize till you're done what you did wrong, and you're looking at the picture and think, how could I possibly have left that with no detail? How could I have let that get so dark? If you do it all up front, if you are boringly predictable and meticulous in your setup, both of the equipment and of your specimen, it'll pay off. So that's it. That's everything I can tell you about how to set up your Mitutoyo to use with a Raynox tube lens. What we will do next time when we're talking about Mitutoyos is we'll take a look at the higher powered ones, and we'll talk about the 10 and 20 times objectives and how you use them and what's different and what's the same. That'll be a while though. We've got a lot of other stuff to clear up first. Yeah, I'll see you again in a few days. Thanks for liking and dinging the bell, and most of all, thanks for supporting me through Patreon or the website. Really, really do appreciate your help. Couldn't do it without you. And I'll see you again in a few days. Till then, stay safe, be well.